Testing, check 1, 2, last. Last minute check.
People on the panel.
We have 6 people here.
So if somebody asks a question from the audience, John, as a panelist, we can repeat the question, so you don't.
Yes. Testing. Does this work?
Yes.
No, that's on a stand, so it won't work as well. Yeah, I guess. That's gonna make a lot of noise. Like, listen. Wait. See, that makes a lot of noise. You can just ask this one.
We didn't rehearse this panel, and that will become obvious here shortly. And so, in fact, I've met most of the panelists this morning, and as likewise they met me. So, not that this will be ad lib, but to just bear with us and have some patience as we go through the panel discussion for the next hour. I will ask each individual panelist to kind of give them just a little bio on who they are, name, and what they do. But before I do that, I'd just like to offer a few comments about me. And Gabriel allowed me to do this, so I'm not violating any protocol this morning. I'm Scott Buren. I'm a retired Marine living in Carlisle. I'm an empty nester now. Kevin Dollar and I were just talking about that, trying to realize the joys of having the children live outside the home. And we're still getting used to that. But they are greatly missed as well, because children are the life of life, as we all know. I'm working for a nonprofit right now. I'm an executive director of a 501c3, a faith-based organization called Cor Christi Trinitate. That was recently resurrected after the founder, Reverend Monsignor George Tracy, passed away in 2009. It's been a labor of love, frankly, and the embers have been slowly burning out after his death, but we were able to resurrect it over the last 30 days with 2 surviving other co-founders. But the name itself means the heart of Christ and the Trinity. And of course, I'm not a theologian and I don't speak Latin, so my interpretation is Christ living in the Trinity. And it's my interpretation because it's an active life. And it is about living in the Trinity and assuming that life and be able to project that, whether as parents, our children, as young adults, youth, and society, and try to better society. It's focused on the Eucharist, living in the Trinity, and it's primarily, the mission is to the moral renewal of leadership in youth, family, military, and other vocations. I'm principally working on youth, family, and the military, being a retired officer and a former faculty member at the U.S. Army War College. And it's really about be able to discern God's will. And frankly, part of that is to have the intellectual capacity and the capabilities to do that. You have to have a good heart and a good soul, but you also have to have the intellectual capacity, in my opinion. And part of that is understanding ethics, to discern God's will, and to realize those fruits of the Holy Spirit, and also to exercise those fruits of the Holy Spirit: mercy, compassion, forgiveness, etc. And that's not always easy in today's society. I think that's one of the reasons why we're here. The other endeavor that I do as well, and as a part-time employee with Penn State University, I teach non-lethal capabilities. And these are technologies that are used to temporarily incapacitate another human being, either through chemicals, millimeter wave, electrical circuits, etc. And we teach law enforcement individuals as well as military. And I teach at all the various war colleges. And frankly, after 30 years of active duty and being involved in 3 conflicts, I realized that you can't solve problems with force. And there's a big distinction here between force and power. Power is life, force is death, it's necrosis. And it leads to an anomic society. And frankly, this is again the reason why we're here. And the reason why I teach non-lethals is because I subscribe to something very simple in life. And I hope that it's something that my children will someday subscribe to as well if they don't now. And it's an old saying from the Talmud, and it's, whoever saves a single life is as if he has saved the whole world. Whosoever destroys a single life is as if he had destroyed the whole world. In essence, no person must be the means for the ends of another human being. And so what non-lethal capabilities does for law enforcement and for military, it creates space. And it creates the ability, allows that individual to exercise their moral conscience, whether it be in a law enforcement scenario or whether it be in a combat situation. That non-lethals allows one to temporarily immobilize somebody in lieu of using lethal means and ending a life. And so even in the military, there's room and a need to exercise the moral conscience. And I won't go into great detail, but we have killed thousands, tens of thousands of people just in the last 12 to 15 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places. Innocents, not just insurgents, Al-Qaeda or ISIL, but innocent life. And so this, again, allows the ability to create space to be able to exercise the moral conscience, to determine someone's intent before one has to use lethal means. And so what I find fascinating, what Gabriel and the entire team does for the Respect for Life movement, is that by education we're creating space to somehow educate the moral conscience, to exercise the fruits of the Holy Spirit, show mercy, to forgive, to admonish someone, to educate the ignorant. I mean, when it comes to pro-life issues, I think we all know, and Mother Teresa said this best, when there's an abortion, two lives end up being basically killed or damaged. One is the aborted fetus, and the other one is the conscience of the mother. And I'll just go back briefly to Cor Christi Trinitate, because it is pro-life. Everything we do should be pro-life, even in the military, because that's the power of life, and that's what we have to subscribe to. Mother Teresa has been a big mentor for Monsignor, Reverend Monsignor George Tracy, again, the late Reverend Monsignor George Tracy. And it was she who affected him becoming a priest in 1981. And I recently, in preparation for this, there was an old documentary done on Mother Teresa, I believe 1985-86. It was narrated by Richard Attenborough, and it's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. Mine's on VHS. That's how old mine is. But she wrote a letter to Monsignor George Tracy, and if I can find it in my notes here, about Cor Christi Trinitate. And this was a letter dated 4 January 1994. And it was Mother Teresa who ordered, and I say ordered because like all good mothers, when they say something, it's usually a commandment to a child. But it was a letter written to Monsignor George Tracy, and it says, Reverend Monsignor George Tracy, go to all the spiritually poor. Those who suffer from spiritual poverty are those whom Christ, in the distressing disguise of the poor, is often hidden from view in the affluence of modern society. And frankly, we live in an affluent society. And it's not necessarily a society that subscribes to life. And slowly, like organizations like this, people on this panel do subscribe to the pro-life. And it's important that we convey this to our youth, especially our children. And I think that's what we're here today as parents. And the thing we have to realize as parents is that our children are faced with incredible obstacles. And because of the age difference, perhaps, we don't realize the challenges that they confront every day. We probably have a very strong Catholic education background, or not, but we subscribe to pro-life issues, and we just don't realize the things that our children are faced with. And so I ask that the panelists today offer those things from your perspective, good things that you do to have your children subscribe to pro-life issues, but also try to capture the challenges that your children are facing, whether they're your own children or those that you may have in the classroom or in the workspace. I've spoken much too long, but I would like now to just pass the microphone from perhaps this side to my left, to my right, and if everybody could just please state your name and a little bit about yourself to the audience, please.
Okay. My name is Mary Lou Bytoff, and I am the Respect Life moderator at Trinity High School. I teach English. I bring up pro-life topics in my English class, and sometimes there are some pretty wild discussions with that, but I don't back down. But I'm honest with them. I try to bring up medical, this really is a human being, like they explained earlier. And I know when kids are questioning, I help them, I give them literature, etc. And kids today really are questioning because they're confused. The media is really doing a number on them. They have to have this, they have to have that, they have to watch the Kardashians, And back when I was growing up, we had Joan Rivers, and she was calling, those kind of girls tramps, and we there was a clear distinction when we were young, and now there isn't. It seems like everything for these young people everything's blurred, and that's why we have to, when they ask questions, we have to be ready to answer them, and that's why I'm here. I'm trying to get some answers as well.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Peters. I'm the Executive Director of the Carlisle Area Family Life Center, which is the local crisis pregnancy center here. I'm a Penn State grad in journalism, and thank God I'm able to incorporate a lot of those skills into my practice at the center. I'm also a mom of 6 children ranging in age from 18 to 11, including 16-year-old twins. So my husband and I are right in the battle raising children in this very awful time politically and culturally against the family, against so many assaults on marriage and children in general. I'm also pursuing graduate work at Shippensburg University for my master's in counseling.
Thanks, Lorraine. Jim?
Hello, my name is Jim Gontis. I am a husband, father of 8 living children, 5 more in heaven, 4 miscarried babies and 1 full-term stillborn baby. I'm the Director of Religious Education for the Diocese of Harrisburg. I'm in my 15th year in that position. Before that was a high school religion teacher and wrestling coach, and that's enough about me.
Hi, my name is Micaiah Bilger. I'm actually transitioning between two pro-life roles right now. I'm the education director of the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, based in Harrisburg, but with volunteers all throughout the state. But I am transitioning into a new pro-life role, and that is as a writer for the website lifenews.com. I live in Mifflintown with my husband. We don't have any children yet, but we are in the process of adoption. And I've had many opportunities to work with young people in my pro-life work, and so hope to share a little bit about my insights that way.
I'm Jason Smith. I have no theological training. I am not in a position with any Respect for Life organization other than to be the husband of Angela, parent of 7 children, and converted Catholic in 1998.
Jason, that's enough of a curriculum vitae, knowing that you're married to Angela. So, I would just like to make an opening statement very quickly, and then we'll go to questions for the panelists, and then also address any questions from the audience. As parents, we have the duty for the moral education and spiritual formation of our children. Their first responsibility to our children is providing a moral education. In fact, a home is well suited for education and virtue. In regard to educating our children, competition is fierce as parents are competing with our children's friends, technology, and the private interest of our own children. We as parents have a moral responsibility to nurture our children in things of the Spirit, and we perform these responsibilities by what we are, who we are, what we do, and what we say. And we should be role models for our children. And there's an old French proverb which says that children have more needs of models than critics. And if I'm guilty of many things, but one thing I tend to be overly critical of my children, probably to a fault. And I need probably to be a better role model. But as parents, we have to acknowledge that educating our children is a cooperative endeavor, whether through the role of the public school and other institutions of religious education as means by which parents can fulfill their responsibility through others, to give their children the religious training which God expects of them. And with that, I'd just like to pose a question, which is to our panelists. It's important as Catholic parents or Christian parents to engage with our children about caring for human life, obviously, and that's the purpose why we're here today. But can you share your methodologies with our audience today, specifically what sources of information that you rely on to convey the importance of protecting life in all stages of development? Any takers on that? Lori?
Thank you for that question. Just by the nature of what I do with the Pregnancy Resource Center has laid an educational foundation for my children. From the very beginning, I've been with the center since 2006 and took over the directorship in 2008. And from that beginning of my tenure there, I have incorporated my children in many aspects of volunteering for different events, helping with newsletter mailings. Anytime I get brochures that I feel would be a good conversation point at home, I always bring those home. So I've been able to incorporate a lot of what we go over at the center with my children. So they've been basically raised knowing that, that life is sacred, this is why it's sacred, and this is how you defend that sacredness with your siblings, with your family members, and in the public.
Lori, what are the ages of your children?
18, 16-year-old twins. I have 2 14-year-olds. We adopted my son. And I have an 11-year-old. And I forgot to mention, I also have 2 children who are now in heaven.
Thank you. Any other takers for that question? Jason?
I don't use the books. I don't follow a guide to teach for my information for the Children for Respect for Life. The sources of information that I get are from our moral values in the church teachings and the natural laws of respecting life. One thing that I encourage my children to do, and a great source of information for me, is to listen and mingle and appreciate people that are on the other side, people that are for euthanasia, people that are pro-choice. It's quite a source of information, and one of the pieces of the battle that we have to overcome, and I like for my children to gain experience in conversations with them from when I've been at pro-choice rallies and listened to people that are on the other side of the fence. Why, might you ask, would I encourage children to be on the pro-choice side and witness and listen to these people? The reason is because we can't help them if we don't understand their concerns. So I find a very valuable source of information to be natural law, the morals of our family, of our church, and a source of information coming from the other side to find their concerns and why they don't see pro-life the way we do.
I think the primary way that we try to and have tried to get the message across to our kids is hopefully through the witness of our lives. And here I'm in no way holding my wife. I'll hold up as a wonderful standard. I won't. But I'm trying and consistently trying to live it out. Failing. I think that's why Jesus gave us the sacrament of penance. But I think really through the witness of life. And I do think, you heard me mention before, contraception, openness to life. Our kids, they really rejoice each time that they have heard that Eva is with child. In fact, my best friend, our last living child, our last living child, my best friend happened to be in our home. He works for the Diocese of Pittsburgh in a position similar to mine. And we met at Franciscan University of Steubenville many years ago. And Chris, who's godfather to two of our children, was there when Eva and I gathered the kids around and told them that she was pregnant with our youngest, Joshua Raphael, and they went berserk. And Chris actually even mentioned that in some of his talks that I've heard him give, that this was just the reaction of the children was beautiful. And so I think that's the primary way, but certainly through a lot of talk too. So when Paul VI said on evangelization, he said, modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers, and if he listens to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. He goes right into saying, though, that this does not dispense us from speaking the truth too. So they've heard that the speaking of the truth is part of the witness as well as the life lived. So we need to be very explicit, and we've tried to do that. You mentioned the natural law. I think that's so important because let's face it, the culture's really militating against us, isn't it? However, what we have going for us is how we're hardwired for God. Right? We're hardwired for the truth by Him, and we're hardwired for love. So, but the explicit teaching of the truth. God says through the prophet Hosea, in Hosea 3, my people are starving for lack of knowledge. A lot of people who need to know the truth explicitly. And so we've tried to provide resources for them as well, and conversation. They, a lot of times, are the signs of contradiction in their classes, in their schools.
Absolutely.
Okay? Students themselves are great witnesses. And I'd like to tell you a story about Maria. Maria was president of my club, and the Respect Life Club, and she was so on fire. And she told, the rest of the club her story. Her mother was told to have an abortion because Maria was going to turn out severely retarded. Well, her mother didn't believe them, thank goodness. Her mother's a nurse. She didn't believe it. She was going to have the baby anyhow. Whatever happened, happened. And Maria was an honor student. And she said what would have happened if her mother had listened. And Maria was an amazing club president. She went through some really tough times with her family, but she ended up teaching at a Catholic school. So I'm really proud of my students. Events like this that you put on and the Pro-Life Federation puts on, that really gets the students fired up. And it gives them courage, and it helps them to carry the message. Thank you.
If I could just add one more thing. I think something, even with my involvement at the center, I think something that really solidified not only, the mission of this movement, but also helped to confirm that, my children and their beliefs weren't alone, was actually taking them to the March for Life. I have been able to do that for several years now. And at the last march that we attended last year, one of my twins, she was on the verge of tears. She just could not believe that there were people, 600,000 of us, who really were passionate about life, about understanding that all babies deserve to be born and all women deserve to have a child. So I would encourage you, if you have, young ones, old ones, whatever, to really take them to the March for Life. Attend as many of the events surrounding the rally and the march itself as you can, because I think that serves as a real good witness to the fact that we aren't alone in this fight. That there are many of us, many, many, many of us who believe that life is worth living.
Anyone else? It seems to me, at least from my perspective, that one of the great things we convey pro-life issues is by being role models, and reiterate what Jason said and all the panelists said. And that perhaps the most optimum way to teach is through being a role model for our children and for others. And not so much to teach by the book or textbook, perhaps merely that just to inform, provide the science. But it really takes an active leadership role as a parent or as an adult to show our children. Now, I'm looking out in the audience and I see a lot of wisdom out there. So I'd just like to ask, from your perspective, based on your experiences, do you have anything to offer regarding methodologies that have worked for you, or perhaps didn't work for you, that you'd like to share with the audience as well as the panelists? Oh, we have a question up front.
Hi, well, I know a lot of you have a lot of experience, so I don't know that I'm giving you anything new, but one thing that I found helpful more with my older children before the internet age is they didn't always want to hear it from me. I mean, they did hear it from me, but they might have been more receptive from other places. So one thing that I think helped, especially with my older children before the internet, is I would leave, the National Catholic Register was always laying around, and they'd be sitting there having breakfast and there's nothing else to look at. They could read the cereal box, or they could read, what was there. And they would just read things and pick things up. So leaving things around I think was helpful for my kids. They just, out of boredom would look at them. The other thing is from a really young age, like from birth, and if you have grandchildren, certainly can do this, is providing really good, really pro-life literature. Baby books, children's books that show big families or welcoming families that are welcoming babies in their storyline. Chapter books that portray families in a positive light and children in positive light. It was like the woman who earlier said, we have to convert hearts. I think we have to keep our innocent children innocent for as long as we can. They come already pro-life. And I think we have to keep really just reinforcing that pro-life, that children are a gift. Old people are a gift. Also literature that shows old people in a valued way. That helps their heart, not their head, but their heart, to reinforce that pro-life message. And it's something that you can do with your grandchildren, you can do with your children, and it's not direct. It's very indirect. But I think that's been positive in our family.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, this is an extension of what Maria said, but it's about literature. That I think simply providing kids with literature with heroes who are struggling to develop virtue is really helpful, because a lot of modern literature doesn't have heroes, or there's no acknowledgement that there is any such thing as objective moral good and virtue. So imagination is the back door to the mind, and I'm just extending that there are even more subtle messages that are helpful in the books that we share with our kids.
Just one thing along that same line. If your children want to read a book that you think is really objectionable, and we certainly have had that in our family, I would say, okay, let's read it together. Sometimes saying no is going to backfire on you, so we would read it together, and I would say, well, what do you think about that? Or how does that sound to you? Or does it, they would get embarrassed, or they would get uncomfortable as we're reading, and that would help them see that literature in light of what our family teaches. So it's not always good just to say, no, that's bad. I mean, sometimes you have to say, no, that's bad. I'm not saying there's not a situation for that, but each situation you kind of have to weigh, I think.
Thank you. This is a great, I'm going to make a quick comment here. It's a great segue into the next question, which is, are the venues out there, methodologies, periodicals out there to teach and relay to our children pro-life issues? We heard National Catholic Register. I think that was that the magazine or the newspaper? Newspaper. And classical literature as well, Aesop's Fables, for instance. I hope nobody here works for Comcast, but something to admit, I just canceled my subscription to cable television, and it was it's like a rebirth. So what I did, I got a free antenna TV now, and I only get like 12 channels. But one is, I think it's called Me TV or something, but it's all the old TV shows. And I probably had it in the 100 and some channels I got, or the 200 and some channels I got before with Comcast. Now down to 12, I get that one. And it's just like when I grew up in the 60s, you got the NBC, ABC, CBS, and that was pretty much it. But what's fascinating is I'm watching these old movies, and they're just rich with, really, they're pro-life dramas. Whether it's Chips, California Highway Patrol, or Emergency, it's pro-life. Very, very different than what our children are seeing on TV. So I'm going to be quiet here, and I'm going to pass it to the mic to our panelists to talk about venues or vehicles that they use or are familiar with and is successful with at conveying pro-life issues to our children.
Our kids vary in age from 17 to 4. So obviously the types of materials that they're going to be reading that are going to vary a great deal. Scripture and the catechism, but they're not exactly, particularly catechism is not exactly an easy read, but we do dig into it a little bit. I think that's important. Also, somebody mentioned some of the classical literature, again, according to age level, that's out there. One of the things that a lot of the whether it's great novels, whether it's some of the old TV shows, they present that is not often presented today is a clear distinction between good and evil and objective truth. You know, Pope Benedict referred to the current society as a dictatorship of relativism. And, we're living through that, and our kids are going through that. So to clearly present to them things that are clearly good and clearly evil so that they can properly see that distinction, I think, is important. Also, the lives of the saints, good lives of the saints, not simply ones that present a lot of legend, because there are those, but good, solid lives of the saints that are interesting, true heroes. But also there is secular literature which is good too and presents clear distinctions. And that sometimes can be very effective. One little anecdote. In 1966, the movie that garnered all of the major Academy Awards, 66, A Man for All Seasons, starring Paul Scofield as St. Thomas More. Imagine how A Man for All Seasons would do at the Academy Awards today.
I guess I was thinking a little bit about older students, high school and college age, and I remember I was in college 8 years ago now, but you really get bombarded in college if you don't go to a Catholic college, and even sometimes if you do, with really anti-life, almost propaganda. One of the books that I found helpful, and I know this name was mentioned before, but Scott Klusendorf's A Case for Life is an excellent book. It's pretty easy, fairly easy to read for a college student or even a high school student, that they're hearing these questions of, well, what about in cases of rape? Isn't that bad for the mother? What about, just all of these questions that they're getting bombarded with, or going to get bombarded with in high school sometimes, and especially in college. A Case for Life, that book goes through all of those questions in almost a conversational type of way, and takes the students or the reader step by step, and explains how to respond to these questions. And I just know that book was very helpful for me, A Case for Life by Scott Klusendorf. Just one of those things that I found very, very helpful.
How do you spell his last name?
I see Jim has it written down here. I think it's Klusendorf.
So in our house, Angela has the theology, the intellectual writings, the encyclicals, and all of the answers for all of the questions that all of the kids asks that they want to read. I like to keep our venue simple. It's the kitchen table. And in the discussions for life, it's important to talk about death, to let them know how they're going to treat their parents when we get older and when perhaps we're at our end of life. And it's a very valuable venue for discussion. I certainly don't want them treating me when I'm at my end of life based on what they've read in a book. I want them to treat me as what they heard when they grew up from me, hoping that my values are the same when I'm at end of life, but it's an important venue, that kitchen table. As far as the pro-life movement, there's nothing better in my book than the kitchen table and being the devil's advocate, or letting them be the devil's advocate when they bring home what they've heard in school, what they've seen on the streets. And I really, once again, I'll just repeat myself, I encourage them to not join in, but participate with the pro-choice movement, because we can't defeat our enemy if we don't understand what their concerns are and how they feel. So that kitchen table is so valuable at mediating the things that they learn, because you can really see some powerful things when they meet someone that's just as intellectual on the other side, and raises good points. And let's face it, we all know good people that are on the other side, and they raise good points, and that kitchen table is a great place to help mediate. And I just have to add, as a follow-up to the venue at the kitchen table, Angie always, now with social media, she always sends them links to the new thing to read, to edify the points that we make. But I feel that the kitchen table is the best venue for a family. The other thing that I like to do at the kitchen table in the proper venue is to talk about dating. We're really good in the Catholic Church to teach about vocations of the ordained, or vocations of the religious single life. But preventative measure for pregnancy is to teach our children how to date. And that dating is indeed the mechanism that's used to discern a vocation of marriage. And if they've worked out the tools, if they've learned about human reproductive organs before they've reached puberty, and if they've learned how to use their human reproductive organs when their surge of hormones is coming during puberty, then it's much easier for them to, when they're in situations, understand that God's putting them through their discernment. And dating is part of discernment. And I don't see many youth teachings about dating. We see pamphlets every now and again. And let's face it, there's always a lot of questions that should be answered at the kitchen table of, is a kiss okay? Is holding hands okay? How do I get a girl out on a date? It's a time for us to talk about respecting each other. It's a time for us to talk about those things. What happens if you get in this situation? And so those venues are so important to me. And I appreciate all of the education that everybody else gives to my children, and I'm so grateful to my wife to be able to do that.
We have one question in the back.
Could I mention three resources for three different, and I'll zip through this. Three resources for three different age groups. Little kids, Angel in the Waters by Regina Doman. We've asked that all of our Catholic schools and religious education programs carry that. Angel in the Waters by Regina Doman, about a baby being born. And it's beautiful, beautifully illustrated, large print, great for little kids. All right, and she's a very, very faithful Catholic woman. Once kids get a little older, works by C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien are wonderful. Chronicles of Narnia, for instance, by C.S. Lewis. And then, as kids get into high school especially, resources including DVD resources from Jason and Kristalina Everett, outstanding. Jason is probably maybe the premier chastity speaker in the country at this point. So there's a few.
Thank you. John, could you help us out here? Mr. Dowling, please.
Hi, my name is Kevin from Carlisle. I'm surprised, well, going back to the first question, I think kids are pretty resilient. They do model our behavior as parents. And Jason, you said you didn't use the books. You just know kind of from common sense, and you always have that teaching moment. But one of the things that I was thankful for, three things. We were able to take our kids to National Catholic Youth Conference. We took them to Mount 2000, and they saw it was cool to be Catholic and to learn about their faith because they saw a bunch of their peers reveling in this stuff. But the other point was the whole theology of the body. The sanctity of life is very important, but and because of that, the sanctity of marriage and the marital act is important. And we were fortunate enough, that's kind of very heady theology, certainly, and maybe not easily understandable by a lot of kids. I think, what's his name? Christopher West has done a great in that regard. But just to summarize, I think kids get it if they see your behavior, and we love them all equally. They buy into the Catholic faith, therefore they buy into our theology, our doctrine, our dogma, and hopefully what we did was to try to prepare our kids for when they went away to college, that they still lived their faith, and included in that is the sanctity of life and the unborn. But none of you really mentioned that aspect of it from a parent standpoint, about which I think, and I'm very grateful that John Paul has given us that. But he started that back in the 80s, and it's only now, in the last 5 to 10 years that we finally are hearing about it and be able to apply that. But how do you as parents, or do you see that? And Michaela, I think you might. Micaiah, I mean, do you think that when you for pro-life education, is that an aspect that you guys try to reinforce out there? That's a long question.
Yeah, we do. Through the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, we have a number of materials. We go out and speak as well. One of the things we do too are tables. We have tables at youth festivals, at church festivals, at just community festivals, where, like Lori's table over here, we show fetal models of babies in the womb that are show what a baby looks like at 12 weeks, at 10 weeks, at 30 weeks, so that kids have this visual. And when kids can pick those up and see those and actually hold them, something tangible in their hands, and see this is what I was like, when I was in my mom's tummy, even for a young child, that makes a difference to them. I know my sister's, youngest sister was adopted. She's 9. There's 20 years in between us. But she, when she was younger, my parents didn't talk a whole lot to her about, all the graphic details of abortion, but they showed her, what a baby looks like in the womb. They read her, what's the name of that book again you just mentioned? Angel in the Waters, a beautiful book showing how a baby develops in the womb and is born. So for a young child, those are very important. And even with the fetal models, one of the things we do is give out these babies at 12 weeks to especially teenagers, and I'm surprised how many just are stunned to see and realize this is what, even at 12 weeks pregnant, this is what a baby looks like. They already have their own unique fingerprints at that point. Their heart's beating, their brain's working, all this stuff. I know last year there was a story of a woman who came up to us, college-age girl, and had taken one of these fetal models back to her dorm. She'd gotten one from us the year before and shared it with a friend who was pregnant, who was thinking about having an abortion, and shared it with this friend and said, this is what a baby looks like at 12 weeks, and we have, some information that goes along with it, a little card, and gave it to her friend. Her friend looked at it, and her friend said she was exactly 12 weeks pregnant, which was the exact age of that baby fetal model that we'd given to her, and she chose life because it became real to her. She saw that this wasn't just a blob of tissue that the abortion centers are trying to tell these women. This was a little baby with fingers and toes and a heart beating. And so sometimes just getting through all the rhetoric of this world and the pro-choice talk and just showing that image can be really, really effective. Yeah.
Any other comments from the panelists? Mary Lou?
Tomorrow we're going to have an open house at Trinity High School, and my club will have a little stand. And I always pass out this information. I'll have it there. And it is from the Pro-Life Federation. It's a hand of a surgeon holding the baby's still in the sac. It was an ectopic pregnancy. and the doctor removed the child. Now, the child could not survive in the fallopian tube, so it had to be removed or the tube would have burst and killed the mother. And so this doctor used to be pro-choice. And then when he saw this baby alive for a little bit, moving around, it did not look like a seahorse or whatever. It looked like a human being, and that changed his mind. And I don't know if you know, do you still have that? And that is so powerful, and I always pass that out to my students. Another thing that I would like to say, that, you know, the Holy Spirit inspires us. And just pray for inspiration. You know, if you have a problem with a child and, you know, you're trying to help a child understand, you know, pro-life. In Advent, when we pray, I said my favorite story is when the Virgin Mary went to help Elizabeth when she was pregnant with John the Baptist, and it was John the Baptist, a fetus, who leapt in his womb to greet Jesus Christ. And I think that's very powerful.
Thank you.
Speaking to what Micaiah and Jason had said about being present to your children, having real life situations, sometimes just driving in the car presents the perfect opportunity for children just to ask questions. I don't know what it is about being in the car, but we'll be on the highway and all of a sudden, usually it's my 16-year-old daughter, Mary, who should be a lawyer, just come out with this crazy question. And I'm driving, I'm like, okay, do I need to pull over or can I answer this directly? Maybe because you just lets your defenses down while you're driving. But, you know, just being present in the moment with them and answering those questions, as well as when you are pregnant and you have a family and your children are old enough to understand what's going on, involving them at all levels of that pregnancy. By the time I was pregnant with my youngest child, my other children were old enough to be aware of what's happening. So I incorporated them in that pregnancy from the very beginning. Showed them the sonograms, showed them, you know, what was happening with the baby. You know, we looked at pictures, we talked, we discussed everything that was happening. They saw that my stomach was getting larger and larger and larger and larger. And, you know, when it came time for me to go to the hospital, they were very, you know, involved with that situation. We all prayed. And then, of course, when we brought the baby home, they were just all over her. I mean, forget about mom. It was all about Gianna. We also talked about what we were going to name her. She's named after the saint, the patron saint of pro-life, Saint Gianna. So, you know, again, that presented a real-life situation about, you know, this is life happening right in front of us in our family.
I'm sure there are stomachs growling. I'm not sure when Gabriel is going to pull the hook here and pull us off. But I do want to get to at least one more question, though. And I mentioned earlier about we may not realize what our children are facing, certainly within our own home or around the kitchen table, but when they leave and they're with their peers, or they go off to school, college, for instance, they're involved in extracurricular activities. My son, a hockey player, and I know exactly what happens on hockey trips. He's in college, and which he tells us, whether it's drugs, alcohol, etc., it's happening. So the comment I have, or the question I have is, do we really fully realize the challenges that our children face? Perhaps we do when they're in front of us, but when they depart our presence, do we truly understand what they have to defend, whether through peer pressure, outside influences, technology, what's on social media, etc.? Do we really fully realize that? And if we do, how are we combating it?
Oh, that's a perfect segue to one point I wanted to bring today. So, let me tell you a little bit about being an Episcopalian, which Episcopalians probably represent a lot of other Christians that aren't Catholics. I was taught it's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't. And it's that way for almost all of the subjects that you could think about that are theologically necessary to us, that we have, as Catholics, that we have a concrete belief in. Our children today are facing a society of it's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't, it has to feel good. and do it for yourself and that kind of thing. And they're witnessing that with their peers. My mother was ERA, and I don't think that they called it pro-choice back in the 70s, but there was some other type of movement. And the big thing was talking about back alley abortions and the women that she had seen go through so much suffering because of the choices that they made. And those things haven't ended. They're still in the things that we talked about in the 70s about being on the other side are still there now. The drugs, the alcohol that doesn't feel good, it's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't. It's out there for our children, and all that we can do is be sure that, first of all, I like to make sure that my children are exposed to it, because if they aren't exposed to it while they're under my roof, I don't have as much input when they leave my roof. So I would rather them face these challenges while I still have some input, or daily input, and they face all of this. I don't know if sex is a large problem that they face in high school. I haven't witnessed it in my house, but I have witnessed the does it feel good? It's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't. And that's a big thing that we have to understand and work with.
Just following up on that too, I think with my parents, I'm a little bit older than this generation now, but 10, 12 years ago when I was in high school and going into college, we started, some of these things were starting to come up. And again, sitting around the kitchen table, discussing really the why. Why is it best to, wait until marriage to have sex? Why is abortion wrong? And getting my parents, ask those questions to get us to think for ourselves a little bit about them, with their guidance, helping us understand the why and just encouraging us really to think about the why. Why is this wrong? Why is this unhealthy? And doing some of the research on it as well. Why is artificial contraception, not good? There are, just kind of going into the why, asking them the questions around the kitchen table, and then discussing it as a family. I think our family did that, and it was just very, very important in my own life.
I think loving them, following what Our Lady of Fatima said, prayer and penance. I think maybe penance isn't stressed enough, including fasting. This kind can only be driven out through prayer and fasting, said our Lord. So I think prayer and fasting, the rosary, the Blessed Bartolo Longo, who St. John Paul II referenced in his apostolic letter on the rosary, sweet chain of salvation which unites us to God. Padre Pio referred to it as the weapon. And then also, as well as the witness, part of that witness is really clearly, we don't have to be a scholar about it, clearly teaching them the truth. In a world which relativizes so much, clearly teaching them the truth. That is a big part of the witness. So often we hear today, it's not just about the head, it's about the heart. But I think we've overheard it, as if the big problem in society over the last 50 years is that people know their faith too much. Okay? So we need to clearly proclaim it, yes, through witness, but part of that is through the catechesis. You know what it really means from the Greek? To hand on by word of mouth. That's what it means.
Lori, Mary Lou?
To answer your question, Jason, yes, there is definite discussions amongst teenagers about sex. Some of the challenges that our family has faced, not within our family, but with our children's peers, definitely, sex is definitely up there as far as a concern and a challenge. My oldest daughter has had friends who have been in unplanned pregnancies. So that automatically opened up the conversation about pro-life issues. How do we help these girls, basically, and these young boys in that situation? What I'm also finding is also a push with relativism in general. I think we touched on that today. And just more of, in relation to that, a lot of push for the transgendered homosexual agenda. Starting in the high school, there is a transgender gay club at Carlisle High School. And again, that atmosphere is proliferate in the college campus. So those are just some of the things that I personally have had to deal with. It's been quite a challenge, and again, in a way, it's been a blessing because it's opened up the door to true, frank conversations about what we believe, why we believe, and what resources we can use to armor ourselves when we're faced with people who perhaps don't share the views that we have.
One thing that I'd like to ask you to do is, know what's going on in your school district. For instance, I live in the northern. Is this one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. For instance, I live in the northern school district, and I do write. I also am a graduate of Penn State Journalism School, and I do write for the local paper just to keep active in that. And I cover the school board, and there was a gay and lesbian club, and there was a big to do about that, and parents were, questioning that. And one of the questions was, why do the Christian students have to meet at the pole outside the building and join hands and pray? But then inside the building, you have the gay and lesbian coalition or whatever they're called. And that needs to be, you have to be aware of what's going on in your community. Okay?
Thank you. I think I'm getting the hook, but I would like to, one last comment. The panel, and to include the audience, mentioned some wonderful periodicals, journals, and books. There's one other one, and it's a quote, and it's Harper Lee's book, To Kill a Mockingbird. Not her most current book, but the book that was published, 30, 40 years ago. And I think is it Atticus Finch that played the lawyer, Gregory Peck in the movie? I think the book quote is a little bit different from the movie quote, but it's basically Atticus Finch said to his children, before you judge another person, human being, put their shoes on and walk around in those shoes for a while. And so and then when I think about our children, we really, maybe it's just my shortcoming, but I really don't feel that I truly understand what my children are facing. In my case, I have a 31-year-old, a 29-year-old, and a 20-year-old, and what they're truly facing. Thank God one is married and one to a beautiful soul. But the challenges, I think, are enormous, and I'm not sure we fully understand those challenges that our children face. And perhaps the best way to deal with it is just having a dialogue with them. Putting those shoes on, so to speak, and it may just be around the kitchen table and having that honest dialogue, and maybe that's the way to start, if not end. So with that, are there just a comment from the audience, perhaps, or one question before we terminate here? Well done. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. And panelists, thank you very much. Man for all seasons.
Yes. My two eldest, well, my son.